Romeo and Juliet. Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Verona, there lived two powerful families, the Montagues and the Capulets. These two households were embroiled in a bitter and long-standing feud, the origins of which had been lost in the mists of time. Their enmity was so intense that it had seeped into every corner of the city, influencing the lives of its inhabitants and turning the streets into a battleground. Amidst this backdrop of animosity and strife, a poignant tale of love and tragedy was about to unfold. Romeo Montague, a young man of about 16, was the only son of Lord and Lady Montague. He was a sensitive and passionate individual, given to bouts of melancholy and prone to losing himself in the depths of his emotions. One fateful evening, as the sun began to set over the red-tiled roofs of Verona, Romeo found himself brooding over his unrequited love for a fair maiden named Rosalind. She was a distant relative of the Capulets, and her indifference to his advances had left him in a state of despair. Meanwhile, in the grand halls of the Capulet mansion, preparations were underway for a lavish masquerade ball. Lord Capulet, a man of considerable wealth and influence, was determined to host an event that would be remembered for years to come. Among the guests invited to this grand affair was Count Paris, a nobleman of high standing who had expressed a keen interest in marrying Juliet, the young daughter of Lord and Lady Capulet. Juliet, a mere 14 years old, was a radiant beauty, untouched by the turmoil that plagued her family. She was innocent, naive, and unaware of the complexities of love and life. As fate would have it, Romeo's friends, Mercutio and Benvolio, persuaded him to attend the Capulet ball in disguise. They hoped that the festivities and the sight of other beautiful women would lift Romeo's spirits and distract him from his infatuation with Rosalind. Reluctantly, Romeo agreed, and thus, he and his friends donned masks and made their way to the Capulet mansion under the cover of darkness. The ball was a spectacle of opulence, with glittering chandeliers casting a warm glow over the elegantly attired guests. Music filled the air, and the sound of laughter echoed through the grand hall. It was amidst this swirl of gaiety and revelry that Romeo first laid eyes on Juliet. Her beauty struck him like a thunderbolt, and in that moment, all thoughts of Rosalind vanished from his mind. He was captivated by Juliet's grace and innocence, and an overwhelming desire to know her filled his heart. Juliet, too, was struck by the sight of Romeo. She found herself drawn to the handsome stranger with the soulful eyes. The two exchanged glances across the crowded room, and in those brief moments, a powerful connection was forged. They managed to steal a few moments alone, away from the prying eyes of their families and friends. In the dimly lit garden, amidst the fragrant blooms and the soft rustle of leaves, Romeo and Juliet spoke for the first time. Their conversation was filled with the shy awkwardness of newfound love, but beneath it lay a deep and abiding affection that neither could ignore. Their meeting was cut short, however, by the realization of their true identities. Romeo and Juliet were horrified to learn that they were the offspring of bitter enemies. Yet, their love was so profound that it transcended the hatred that had divided their families for generations. They knew that their love was forbidden, but they were determined to find a way to be together. In the days that followed, Romeo and Juliet met in secret, their love blossoming in the shadows. They confided in Friar Lawrence, a wise and compassionate priest who had long been a friend to both families. The friar, seeing the purity and depth of their love, agreed to marry them in secret, hoping that their union might one day bring peace to Verona. Their clandestine wedding took place in the quiet solitude of Friar Lawrence's cell. With only the friar and Juliet's loyal nurse as witnesses, Romeo and Juliet exchanged vows and pledged their undying love for one another. For a brief moment, they were united in bliss, dreaming of a future where their love could flourish openly. However, their joy was short-lived. The streets of Verona, still simmering with the tension of the family feud, soon erupted into violence. Tybalt, a hot-headed Capulet and Juliet's cousin, confronted Romeo and his friends. Insults were exchanged, and a duel ensued. Mercutio, Romeo's close friend, was mortally wounded in the skirmish. In a fit of grief and rage, Romeo avenged his friend's death by killing Tybalt. The consequences of his actions were swift and severe. The Prince of Verona, weary of the constant bloodshed, decreed that Romeo be banished from the city. The news of Romeo's banishment struck Juliet like a dagger to the heart. She was torn between her love for her husband and her loyalty to her family. Desperate to be with Romeo, she sought the counsel of Friar Lawrence once more. The friar devised a plan. Juliet would take a potion that would induce a death-like sleep, making her family believe she was dead. She would then be laid to rest in the Capulet tomb, where Romeo would come to retrieve her, and together they would flee Verona. Juliet bravely agreed to the plan, and on the eve of her wedding to Paris, she drank the friar's potion. Her family, devastated by what they believed to be her sudden death, laid her to rest in the family tomb. Friar Lawrence sent word to Romeo, explaining the plan and urging him to come to Juliet's side. Tragically, the message never reached Romeo. Instead, he received news of Juliet's death from his servant, Balthasar. Overcome with grief, Romeo acquired a vial of poison and rushed to Juliet's tomb. There, in the cold, dark silence, he found his beloved, her lifeless body draped in a shroud. Believing her to be truly dead, Romeo drank the poison, choosing to join her in death rather than live without her. Moments later, Juliet awoke from her induced slumber to find Romeo's lifeless body beside her. The horror and sorrow that filled her heart were indescribable. With a final, desperate act of love, she took Romeo's dagger and plunged it into her own heart, reuniting with him in death. The tragic end of Romeo and Juliet served as a powerful catalyst for change. The two families, brought to their senses by the devastating loss of their children, finally saw the futility of their feud. In their shared grief, they reconciled, vowing to honor the memory of Romeo and Juliet by ending the hatred that had torn them apart. Thus, the story of Romeo and Juliet became a timeless testament to the power of love and the destructive force of hate. Their love, though fleeting, was profound and true, transcending the barriers of family and societal expectations. Their deaths, though tragic, brought about a profound change in their world, reminding us all of the enduring truth that love can conquer all, even in the face of the greatest adversity.